Hello everyone. Today we are gonna talk about on the translation of the Do Story written by Edward Albee. My name is Shen Wei, and this is Chen Bocheng. So this is what we are gonna talk about today. The first is the drama language features. The second is the impact of the features of dramas on translation. The third is translation theories. The fourth is translation strategies, and the fifth is translation examples. So first, let's welcome Chen Bocheng to present his parts to you.
Hello everyone, this is Chen Bocheng, and in drama language features, there are 6 parts we're going to talk about. The first one is poetry-like style. The second one is colloquialism, spoken language. And third one is rhetorical skills. And fourth is implicitness. And fifth is personalization. And last but not least is the action. So in poetry-like style, first we should know what it is about. Poetry-like style is theater needs stimulation, and according to Linsky, it is also a language both lyrical and action-oriented, and it is a language art that requires the most refinement and richness of generalization. And last but not least, it is a deep impression and unlimited aftertaste. In the second part, before the second part, we're going to talk about an example about poetry-like style. His fall from physical grace should not suggest debauchery. It has to come closest to it. A great weariness. Okay, we translate it into 身体上的堕落并不代表他道德败坏，所以他始终生活在厌烦当中。We're going to give it a comment. So the sentence depicts the state of life of Jerry, one of the main characters in the play, who is physically challenged but does not choose to be moral depraved, and at the same time indicates an attitude that he faces life because of the injustice that life has done to him. And here comes the second part, colloquialism, spoken language. The spoken language style of drama firstly puts special requirements on the musicality of the lines. And second, the spoken language of drama also requires the choice of lines to be more shallow than deep. And here comes the example. Where's the John? Or what time does the feature go on? And keep your hands to yourself. And we translated it into 厕所在哪儿？电影什么时候上映？或是老弟，你的手往哪放呢？ So we give it a comment. The lines are catchy and the language has a sense of rhythm. The rhythm of the voice has its ups and downs, and the tone of the voice is beautiful when it has its own rhythm. And coming next, rhetorical skills. Common rhetorical skills used in common as below. The first one is hyperbole, and the second one is double entendre. Third one is superposition, and the fourth one is antithesis. Last but not least is simile. And here comes an example about simile. Although he is moving into middle age, his dress and his manner would suggest a young man, would suggest a man younger. And its translation is, 虽然他已步入中年，他的穿着和举止使他看上去像一个年轻人。So here's the comment. The sentence uses an allusion to the fact that although he is moving into middle age, his dress and his manner would make him a younger man. Okay, and the fourth part is implicitness. About implicitness, it is drama lines are a form of expression of the inner activities of dramatic characters. In everyday life, people do not always express his potential inner activities to each other without reservation and in full view. The real dramatic language is precisely the dialogue that contains rich potential inner activities. And the refinement and subtlety of the language of drama is often manifested in a rich subtext contained in the extremely ordinary and simple language. And let's see the example. What I mean is animals are indifferent to me like people. And its translation is 我的意思是动物对我不感兴趣，人们就像人们。The sentence expresses Jerry's belief that animals are not interested in him and are just as oblivious to him as everyone else, implying that he feels abandoned by the world. And next one is personalization. The language of drama is characterized by obvious characterization. On the one hand, it is required that the language of each character should be in line with the character's identity, age, sex, occupation, experience, and other characteristics. On the other hand, it is more important that the character's language should reflect the character's thoughts, feelings, and personality traits. And when you see the character's language, you should know roughly what kind of person the character is. And let's see the examples. Although he is moving into middle age, his jazz and his manner would suggest a man younger, and his fall from physical grace should not suggest debauchery. He has to come closest to it a great weariness. So as you can see, the two examples above we have been mentioned. Okay, and its common is about two sentences denote the character settings of the two main characters of the play, Zoo, respectively. Peter, who is an upper classmate, is springing up, and although he is getting old, he still wants to appear young through the outside. Compared to the former, Jerry does not show his old age, but the ravages of life have made him develop misanthropy, while the former is old in body but not in mind, and the later is the opposite. And about action. Last but not least, action is the means, it's a means by which the playwright creates characters in action. If the drama does not create actionable language, it cannot create actionable characters either. And dramatic line, no matter what stage of dramatic development it is in, is action-oriented and based on rich inner activity. Dramatic language rich in action should have a twofold function. On the one hand, it can express the character's own psychological activities and cause strong external physical movements. On the other hand, it can stimulate the other party, prompting the other party to produce the corresponding language and the movements. And here comes the example. I didn't need anything like that when I got older. It's being translated into 我长大了就不需要这类玩意了。About its common, the sentence's actionability is not expressed in the performance. In the midst of the language, the speaker expresses a strong protest against the other person as well as demonstrate his own rebellion against cowardice. And coming next, okay, we are going to talk about the second part, the impact of the features of dramas and translation. On translation. The first one still the colloquialism of language. The second one is characterization of language, including plain and elegant. And third one is treatment of cultural elements. So let's see the first part. In the first part, it is dramatic literature has its own special way of communication, although the script is in written form. It is ultimately to be separated from text through the mouths of the actors and actresses, and to realize the communication with the audience through the form of stage performance. When the translator is engaged in the translation of a play, he should also bear in mind that the character's dialogues he translates must be suitable for stage performances, and he must consider the requirements of both the actors and the audience. On one hand, the character's dialogues should be in line with the characteristics of spoken language and have considerable readability so that the actors can recite them on stage. On the other hand, in order to facilitate the audience's listening, enjoyment, and comprehension, the language of the performance text should be different from that of the written language, which is only for reading, with less bookishness and more popularity. The translator's ideal should be easy on the reader's eyes, easy on the audience's ears, and easy on the actors' mouths. And second part, characterization of language. Dramatic language is highly characterized language, which reproduces the character, cultivation, and the interests of people in real life. As you know, thousands of people have thousands of faces and thousands of voices. If one cannot get into character and translate into thousands of faces and voices, and turn thousands into one, the play will come to naughty. And the translator should try his best to pursue the goal when dealing with personalized character dialogues. And in the third part, treatment of cultural elements. First, in the process of translation, certain adaptation and compensatory means can be utilized, and the commonly used methods is to carry out explanatory translation in the form of in-text direct translation and out-of-text annotations. With regard to the translation of cultural background, the translator must take into account the notelessness of the translation of the play, but also need to make some other fine-tuning, including the treatment of slang, intimate acts of abuse with treatment. And next part, I would like to give it to my partner, Shen Wei, to give us the more translation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan. So the third part is translation theories, and we discovered some important and relevant translation theories for the translating of the play, The Zoo Story. The first translation theory I would like to share with you is Nada's dynamic equivalence. Nada points out that translating consists in reproducing in the receptor language the closest and natural equivalent of the source language message, first in terms of meaning and secondly in terms of style. Nada believes that the primary task of translation is to make readers understand the translation at their first glance. In other words, The translated text should be smooth and natural so that readers can understand it without the knowledge of the cultural background of the source language. This requires the translator to avoid the translationist as much as possible and use as many idiomatic expressions as possible in the target language. From the perspective of social linguistics and the communicative function of language, Nada holds that translation must take readers as the central object of service. To judge whether a translation is correct, we must take the reader's reaction as the criteria. If the response of the target readers is basically the same as that of the original readers, then the translation can be considered as a success. The dynamic equivalence advocated by NIDA represents the equivalence of two relations. One is the recipient of the original text, and the other is the recipient of the translation text. The application of this concept of equivalence in drama translation means that after the drama script is translated into another language, the script readers or theater audience in the target language should get roughly the same understanding and feeling as the original readers or audience. That is to say, the same information in two different languages has different recipients, but it should strive to produce basically the same effect. And then the second translation, in addition, when NIDA talked about the principle of functional equivalence, he also made a special point. How the translation will be used has an important influence on the degree of the translator's adjustment to the original text in the translation process. For example, there is often a big difference between the translation of a script for private reading and the translation of a script for a stage performance. The translation of the former type of script can allow a dialogue with relatively short and formal wording, because the differences or difficulties in understanding can be made up by footnotes. However, footnotes cannot be used to solve the audience understanding difficulties during stage performances. The second translation theory I'd like to share with you is functionalist translation theory. It is significantly different from traditional linguistics-based translation theory. Traditional linguistic translation theory often focuses on the source language, emphasizing that the content, form, and the style of the source language must be preserved in the target language. Functionalists, on the other hand, pay more attention to the transmission of the purpose and intention of the source language in the translation. Reis, a German translation scholar who is the representative of functionalist theory, thinks that an ideal translation should achieve the purpose and efficacy of the target language works, are equivalent to the content, language, form, and communication function of the source language works. Vermeer, another representative of functionalists, put forward in his scopus theory that the most critical factor to determine the translation efficacy is the target audience, that is, the readers. Audiences are listeners of the target language. However, the target audience often has a unique worldview, expectations, and communication needs influenced by their cultural environment. Vermeer believes that all translation activities have their target audience, so translation also means the process of creating a text in the target language environment that is acceptable to the target audience. All in all, functionalist translation theory also puts the audience of the translation into an important position in translation studies, which is also an important aspect the translators of drama works need to pay attention to. Because the audience of target language plays is different from the readers of novels, poems, and other literary works, the active participants in the process of drama performance, and the audience reaction largely determines the success or failure of a drama. Therefore, in the process of translation, translators of dramas should pay more attention to the cultural environment of the target audience and the acceptance of the target drama by the target audience in a limited time and space, such as the theater. The last translation theory I'd like to share with you is Basnet's translation theory. There is a very important principle in Basnet's translation thought. Translation is by no means a purely linguistic act. It is deeply rooted in the culture in which the language is located. Basnet believes that translation is the communication within and between cultures. Translation equivalence in the cultural equivalence between the source language and the target language. According to Basnet's point of view, one of the ways for translation critics to judge a translation is from the narrow standard of how close the translation is to the original. The second method is to judge from the quality of the translated works. Basnet thinks that the second method is practical. After all, the translated script should be able to put on the stage for performance. In addition, when talking about the function of translation, Basnet thinks that the function of translation mainly depends on 2 points. The first is the target of translation. The second is the function of the source text in the source culture. According to these 2 points, the translator should make the target culture and the source culture functionally equivalent in translation, so that the translated texts can have the same effect on the readers of the target culture as the readers of the source culture. So, in conclusion, the 3 translation theories give priority to the target readers, which in this case are audience who watch and enjoy the dramas. According to these translation theories, the translated text should center on the audience and be easily understandable for them. And these 3 translation theories are the guiding translation thoughts when we translate the zoo story. We try to make this story as understandable for China's audience as possible. In the next part, I'd like to share with you some specific translation strategies. Through careful observation, Marco puts forward 3 sets of criteria, which are variables about the translators referred to when making translation decisions. The first is translation purpose. Is the translation for reading or performance? The second is the degree of preservation of the cultural background of the source language. Should we make the translation literary translation or domestication translation? And the third variable is the carrier of language expression, whether the drama is full of poems or poetic style language or prose styles or not. In our translation of the zoo story, A and B appear, so here we will talk about A and B. Marco's script translation standards provides a decision-making framework for drama translators. An important point that the drama translator should first consider when making translation decisions is his translation purpose or translation function. That is, whether his translation is for publication or for stage performance. The texts used for reading and performance are quite different from the challenges and restrictions put forward by translators. When the translated texts are for performance, translators should fully consider whether the target language script is performable and whether it can be successfully put on the stage by actors. Secondly, the degree to which the cultural background of the original script can be conveyed by another important point the drama translators need to consider when making choices. If the cultural background of the source language can be conveyed to the target audience smoothly and without understanding difficulties, then translators can completely consider retaining the cultural background of the source language. That is, adopting literal translation. However, when literary works involve costumes or concepts with strong regional culture, translators must make some adjustments or compensations. And in the final part, I'd like to share with you some of our translation examples, especially how we deal with some special cases, special cases that appear in our translation. The first is our handling of capitalized words. In this drama, many words are capitalized to express emotional excitement and anger, or one character is ordering another character to do something. For example, Peter, my bench. Peter, get out. Peter, I warn you. These three sentences were made when Jerry kept ordering Peter to give up the bench, and Peter gradually became angry and responded to Jerry in such ways. When translating these sentences, we first translate them literally and then make them bold to correspond to the dramatic meaning expressed by the capitalized letters of the original text, as you can see. During the performance, the actor will say these lines in an angry way consistent with the emotions of the original characters. And the second is the colloquialism of the drama. Compared with the language of novels, essays, and poems, drama language has a unique feature. The difference between drama literature and other literary styles is that the language elements that make up script are not long scenery descriptions, character sketches, or the expression of meanings, but the script language is mainly composed of dialogues between characters. Therefore, we retain the colloquialism of the original drama and try our best to use short sentences and simple structures that are in line with the Chinese language habits. Avoid elegant written language and translate the text into the language that is familiar by the target language readers, so as to make the lines more popular and create convenience for the actors to read aloud, perform, and the audience to listen, appreciate, and understand. Peter, what? I'm sorry, were you talking to me? We translate this sentence to 什么？对不起，你刚才是在跟我说话吗？ As you can say, we return the colloquialism feature of the original drama, and then we make the language very, very plain. It is not understand at all to understand. It is not difficult at all to understand this sentence. It's not elegant at all. The third is the culture-specific items. How do we handle them? There are many words related to the cultural background, such as place names in this play. For these words, American audiences are often familiar with them because they are part of the culture they live in, and there will be no obstacles to understanding them. However, for the audience in China, unless they are familiar with American society and culture, most people know little about these words with cultural meanings. When dealing with these words, drama translators publish in written form usually add notes or translate these famous words literally, so that readers who have doubts can find relevant materials by themselves. However, the drama translation for stage performance cannot adopt this approach, and the audience and the scene can't refer to any materials. So in this case, we adopt different methods when dealing with different kinds of cultural-specific items. For those CSIs who do not pose obstacles to their understanding of the plot, we choose directly literal translation. That's 7th, 4th Street, and the zoo is around 65th Street. As you can say, 7th, 17th, 4th Street, and 65th Street are very unfamiliar for Chinese readers. But these two streets have no special connotations and they have no specific effects on the development of the plot. So we decide to reserve it and make the literal translation. And next is Jerry. All right, who are your favorite writers? Baudelaire and G.P. Marquardt. Baudelaire and G.P. Marquardt are famous poets and readers. Here, we retain their names in the translation, hoping the audience could know and search more about these two persons. So we directly translate them as 伯德莱尔和 G.P. 马昆德. But for those culture-loaded words that are important to the development of drama, we choose to replace them with China culture words. For example, Peter, I live between Lexington and 3rd Avenue on 74th Street. Peter, oh, you live in a village. Although the two places named here and the above-mentioned place name seems to be quite similar, they reveal the completely different social status of the two protagonists in the drama. Peter is rich, so he lives in a more upscale place in the city. But Jerry is poor, and the conditions where he lives are not so good. Therefore, we translate it into city center of the village and the city so that the audience can understand it better. We translated them as 市中心 and 城中村 respectively, so that China audience can easily understand what they are talking about, what their connotations are. And finally is the idioms. Jerry, that is the way the cookie crumbles. Actually, cookie crumbles is an idiom used when something bad has happened to say that someone must accept things the way they are. This idiom is common in the United States. It's an informal language that Americans often use in their daily lives. In translation, in order to make the audience in China understand the text, we remain its basic connotation and translate it directly as follows. 事情结果弄成这样，毫无办法。And next example is, Jerry, I'll tell you why I do it. I don't talk to many people except to say like, give me a beer or where's the John? Where's the John is an informal expression asking where the bathroom is. We directly translate it as follows. 厕所在哪儿? So that China audience can easily understand what it means. In conclusion, in our translation, we respect the receivers of the translation and we adopt the audience-centered translation method and try our best to translate foreign elements into China elements that are familiar and understandable to the audience. The audience could understand Edward Albee's Zoo story through our translation. So we have two questions for listeners. The first is, are there any differences between translating Shakespeare's works and translating modern dramas such as the Zoo story? And secondly, what's your opinion about translation needs? Do you think it's acceptable in the translation text to retain the translation needs? Here is our references. So thank you very much.